Hello and welcome back to another Warcraft video. This time it is going to be one of my top 5 lists, and today we are going to be tackling the topic of what are the top 5 zones in World of Warcraft, in my opinion. Now, first of all, it's probably worth saying the zones that I have personally went through, because there are just so many in the game, and I'm not a giant sort of power leveler kind of person, so I haven't really done all of them. So first of all, I've leveled up through the entire human path. So that's pretty much like Western Plaguelands, Eastern Plaguelands, that was all pre-Cataclysm. Most of Kalimdor, let's see, I've reached level 60 on both the old and Cataclysm versions of the Eastern Kingdoms, but post-Cataclysm I haven't really been to the northern parts. I've also done every zone in Outland, Northrend, Cataclysm, and Pandaria. So really, my experience kind of falls short, quite a bit in Kalimdor, and then some parts of the Eastern Kingdoms where I just haven't got around to doing the post-Cataclysm stuff. And I have also only leveled Alliance characters, and I'm sure this list would look very different if I had have leveled through as a Horde, and perhaps seen things like the Stone Talon Mountains from the Horde perspective. I really do want to get to all that at some point, and who knows, maybe I'll do a short update to this video at some point. And then, of course, finally, just a bit of a disclaimer, this list is totally subjective. Now, in an effort to get a more objective look at what people, or at least my audience, think, I'm going to ask you to leave your overall top 5 in the comments, and then perhaps any reasoning that you might have. After this, I will do a follow-up video where I correlate everyone's responses, rank the zones, and see overall what people seem to enjoy the most. And then I'll highlight some of the more interesting posts, people talking about why they enjoyed zones. So I think overall that would be a load of fun. Now, as with my last list, I'm going to split things up, because it's really, I think just doing the top 5, yeah, I'll do that at the end, but there's more of an interesting discussion that can happen, and that's going to happen by me breaking it into 2 categories. The first one is the aesthetic list, and then the second one is story. Story questing and that sort of thing. Now, I have broken the rules a little bit. The aesthetic list is 6 long, and the story list is 4 long, so I suppose on average it is a top 5. That's one thing, and then also, there are some zones which really do have fantastic qualities, but because of 1 or 2 niggling problems, I had to reduce them down to an honourable mention. But there will be quite a few honourable mentions. So anyway, enough dilly-dallying, let's get into the aesthetic list. So, number 6, we have the Burning Steppes, and by extension, the Searing Gorge. I think these places have just got a hell of a fantastic vibe going on. The landscape itself was very dark and thematic, which I really liked, and then in combination with the music of the zones, and then the art of certain things, like say the old dwarven architecture, it made this place feel like it was old, it had a lot of history, and that terrible things happened there, and that is really the truth behind the zone. And I just really think that they succeeded in having this fantastic overarching feel to the 2 zones. They're probably not the most pretty to look at, but certainly I think that there's a lot of great stylistic stuff going on there. One thing that's definitely worth taking a look at is the big kind of statues. Actually, these were the statues that were on the original login screen, I think. But they're in the Searing Gorge, and they look really cool. But yes, overall, I just think these 2 zones have got a fantastic sort of style to them. Anyway, then next we have Netherstorm coming in at number 5. And holy crap, this place was cool. It was just so wholly stooped in magical energy, and that came through so much in the design. There were floating islands everywhere, a very cool skybox, and then a lot of the big giant looming Blood Elf mana harvesters. Tempest Keep itself also looked very, very unique, and its satellite structures fitted in very well with the aesthetic. Despite spaceships not really being what you would normally associate with a fantasy setting, I think they overall just they pulled off such a unique feel. Then we also have the Ethereals and their ecodomes. They were just like the big ecodomes. And while these did look really cool on the outside, what was nice is when you go inside them, there's such a large visual difference between the inside and the outside. It really breaks up the zone, and it's a great change in scenery. I just think that overall the design of this place was fantastic, and also the music, and more just the sound design, where you had that crackling lightning in the background. You felt like you were kind of at the brink of nothingness, really. Like that if you went too far off Netherstorm, the whole sort of everything would just dissolve into nothing, and it really did feel a bit like the end of the world, or more after the end of the world, I suppose, since it was so torn to pieces and destroyed. I just think it was damn cool. And it was also pretty. Lots of pretty colours. So that goes quite well for it. Then at number 4 we have Nagrand. This place looked absolutely amazing, in my opinion. First of all, we do have the floating islands, and I think they were cool, especially when there was like little lakes on them and waterfalls and that kind of thing. So that was really nice. Then there was also Oshugun itself. Now, Oshugun really was a fantastic set piece, and it just defined that section of the zone. It was nice to have Nagrand be sort of kind of varied in terms of the specific features that it had. You had Talador, or whatever, not Talador, Tilar, whatever, the Draenei place. You had the Horde base, the Circle of the Elements, the big, like, Twilight place up to the top left. Then there was the parts of the zone where it basically felt like it was falling away into nothingness. Then Oshugun, Hala in the center. I just think all these things looked really, really nice. Another great thing about the zone is that it felt vast. Your vision was not constantly hemmed in by countless trees and things like that, and there was basically always a really awesome view while you were questing there. I think that it just made it feel like you were in this kind of beautiful place, but it was still floating in space. It really sort of captured that feel. And then the skybox, of course, I think is very pretty. I'm also a big fan of the music in this place. It nearly felt like I was kind of stepping backwards into an episode of Walking with the Dinosaurs or something. I just think it was really, really nice. Then at number 3, we have the Howling Fjord. I think this place was just masterfully designed. First of all, the Alliance intro is absolutely fantastic. This whole boat ride in between the cliffs where you can see other destroyed boats and Vrykul harpoons and the really kind of cool flame effect they had going on in Northrend. And then when you break through those cliffs and it opens up into the amazing vista of Utgard Keep, Valence Keep, or I think it was Valgard actually, whatever, and it was just overall very memorable, and it was just an amazing introduction to Northrend. You got to see so much. There was the kind of foresty vibe going on, and then there was the glaciers and the icebergs and things like that on your way in, and well, not glaciers obviously, but the icebergs, I suppose, and I just think that was really nice. Then also the Vrykul aesthetic is one of my favourite in the game. It did a great job of nailing this Viking feel that they were going for. Then also I really liked the Alliance bases in the zone. Each one of them felt reasonably different, with Westguard kind of being perched on the cliff, with the really nice view of all the icebergs and that sort of thing, and then also Valgard being under constant threat with all the looming Vrykul structures that practically surround it on all sides, and then finally Wildervar with its idyllic lakeside setting, and then of course it had the giant mountain behind it. I just think all of this was very thematic, and it just fitted in so well with the music and the setting and the story that they were going for in the zone. The music, too, actually does help win the place over. It really just nails the whole kind of, I don't know if it's a Nordic feel, there's a bit of, would you even say half Celtic with the bit at the start, but whatever, I'm just going to say Nordic and be happy with that, but I just think whatever they were going for, they nailed it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then coming in at number 2, we have the Isle of Keltonas, and I really just love the Blood Elf architecture and how well woven in it is into the beautiful northern forests of the region. The structures themselves just look simply fantastic to me. They have this really unique feeling that it just feels like the magic is kind of imbued into them at all parts of the design, and it really is quite visually pleasing. It's also cool the way they nearly feel like they weave in with the forest, and they just seem to blend so well. Then of course there is the whole colour palette of the zone, with the nice bright colors. They're kind of warm and it just feels summery, and normally I'm not like that. Summer is actually my least favorite time of the year. I prefer winter, which probably explains a lot of my picks on these different lists, but I just think that it overall came together to form this really fantastical, cohesive land, and once again this was all backed up by excellent music which really sort of reinforced a lot of the themes that were going on. As for the Isle of Keltonas in particular, I really enjoyed the kind of disparity between the Shattered Sun offensive style and then that of the actual Kilvas's soldiers, and the color palette they were going with, the Blood Knights and that sort of thing. I think that was really cool, and then also having the big undead place just sort of served to be just to sort of emphasize how this beautiful place had been destroyed by the Scourge, and then also the demonic elements as well, because I think demons, they just create such a great contrast with the rest of the zone. It really is quite the thing. And this is normally where I do number 1, but instead I'm going to do honourable mentions. So the first honourable mention is for most of the rest of Northrend, minus Zuldrak. I really love this content as a whole, but I decided that I couldn't have the list populated with nothing but Northrend. That said, Northrend may feature again. So yeah, and then we have the Vale of Eternal Springs or whatever, Blossoms, and then the Jade Forest. I think the Jade Forest has got some truly stunning vistas, but overall, the jungle parts of the zones just sort of fall apart. They did craft a lot of beautiful places, and then they ensured that we never got too involved with them during leveling. I think one of the big things was the Jade, is it the Jade Temple? It's pretty cool, and we get to go there in the instance, and then the 1 or 2 times that we see it, but really the only time we see it after that is when it's all Sha infested and kind of destroyed. And one of the things in this zone that I really actually think was the coolest was the parts where you had in the sea, there was these kind of like big jutting out rocks. These really giant, kind of tall, thin things. And yeah, there's like beautiful Asian-style bridge going from 1-to-1 up to this pagoda. And I think it was really unfortunate how they created this space, and then you could go there to explore, and you really get nothing in return. There was nothing there. It felt so underutilized. I was actually listening to an episode of Extra Credits about negative space, and that's when like the developers allow you to go somewhere that really is cool, and there's a lot of player agency, and you just think, wow, I want to go there, but then they never really give you the payoff at the end, and it's an issue in game design. And I think that the Jade Forest was really just rife with problems like this, where they squandered the actual beauty of a lot of what they made. I just think if there was less of the kind of dense, swampy forest areas, and more of the really cool Asian-themed places, then I would have preferred the zone. Don't get me wrong though, I know that they were going for the entire bamboo forest aesthetic, and while it's fantastic in concept, I just don't think that they fully realised the place's potential, and perhaps the overall layout of the zone could have been done a little bit better. Then we have the Vale, and the Vale is really pretty, it's quite picturesque, but I just think the tile set was too limited for my liking. And I know you may be thinking, well, I mean, Keltonas has got kind of one colour set going. Yeah, but I just think it was a little bit more vibrant and pleasing to the eye than the Vale was. That said, the Vale is quite pretty. Anyway, next we have Hellfire. Now, hang on a second, I know that this place is not ultra popular, but it does get a mention anyway, and this is because of its intro. Now, my first time in here was just a few months after the Burning Crusade released, and all of this stuff was fresh. And just from coming from old Azeroth and being used to it, the visual spectacle of going through the Dark Portal was just such a memorable moment. If you've ever listened to The Instance, it's one of the, well, you probably have, it's the most popular World of Warcraft podcast that there is, but Scott Johnson, who's the host there, always talks, or not always, but regularly talks about his Hellfire moment when he first stepped through the portal, and I completely echo his opinion in that one. The whole demonic assault on the portal gave a great vibe, and hell, even the portal itself looks stunning. It was massive and evil, and it just correlated perfectly with, well, the sort of troubles that the damn portals brought to us. So yeah, Hellfire, I think your execution may have fallen short in many regards, really, but at least that intro is definitely worth a mention here. Then we have Winter Spring, and this zone isn't really good enough to get on the list, but I do remember questing here, and I actually remember the quests themselves being shockingly bad, but I found the place really, really charming, and I think that charm is just enough for me to put it in this list. And then we have Darkshire. Now, this place felt really oppressive to me, and I just wish that in the Cataclysm version they kept more of the vanilla music. But with the vanilla music, just the whole kind of, first of all, the fact it was damn dark, especially at night, that in combination with the music and just the vibe and the tone of everything, it was just really creepy, and I think it was just extremely well executed in terms of aesthetic. It did, of course, have the problem where the quest would have you going from one end of the zone to the other constantly. That wasn't too fun. And then finally, the last honourable mention that we're going to give is the Night Elf stuff. I think it's actually pretty cool, and it's worth saying that while it doesn't directly appeal to me, I'm sure a lot of people do like it, and it will be up there on their list, and that's totally fine. I was recently going through places like Feralus and Dire Maul, and there's actually some really pretty stuff. So yeah, Night Elves, I mean, your stuff's cool, but it just doesn't necessarily appeal to me. Still though, I think it is worth a mention because of how just kind of nicely woven into the forest it kind of looks. Then, at number 1, what is my favourite zone by aesthetic? It is the Grizzly Hills. This zone just basically at best correlates to my favourite real-world kind of place. It does everything that I'd want. It's got this mixture of a giant redwood forest, and then it's got the snow-capped mountainous areas to the south, and it overall just gave it so much charm, and it was a charm that appeals directly to what I like in a place. To me, it just really did feel great. First of all, the Alliance base was that kind of cool hunting lodge, and I just really liked how that sort of played out. And then the fact that there's all the trees, and there's just something about the way the redwood forest was done. And then you had, say, the streams with the bears trying to catch fish on them, and just all these different things in combination with the music, which I thought was perfectly sort of evocative of the tone of the zone. I just think it all came together in a very good way. Then also we have, what was it called? Venture Port or something like that, to the very south of the zone, where the Venture Company were, and the Alliance and Horde would fight there. I actually really enjoyed the Alliance and Horde questing there when you were fighting the other faction. I thought it was very cool. And just overall the kind of aesthetic of that port, I just liked it a lot. I suppose when I think about places that I've been to in the real world, I think two of the ones that were most visually impressive to me were the time I was in Iceland, which is an amazing place, and then when I was in Yosemite National Park in America. Both of them were damn cool. And the time that I was in Yosemite, you got to see kind of the giant forest, and then there was still a lot of snow about the place, so it was very cool. And yeah, overall, Grizzly Hills, I just kind of love the place. So yeah, it wins. Now, next, let's move on to my top 4 by story and lore. Now, I could only get 4 in there, and there are a good few honorable mentions again, but for one reason or another, I just didn't feel like I could really justify that number 5 place for some of these zones. Also, it's worth saying that I think that World of Warcraft has fantastic lore spanning the whole game, but often I don't think they do a great job of translating this into a very compelling and well-written questing experience. In fact, some of the writing in World of Warcraft is just damn awful. I mean, it's really cringeworthy at times, and then that's often coupled with just cringeworthy voice acting, which is really unfortunate, so it does limit a lot of this list. But still, I am a lore nut, as you can probably tell if you just look at my channel. And it's also probably worth saying as well that Westfall may have made it into number 5 if its questing did not end so abruptly. And then, finally, if I had played through the Horde Stone Talon Mountains, I'm pretty sure it would have been on here as well, just based on what I've heard from other people. Anyway, so, coming in at number 4, we have Red Ridge. The John J. Keeshan questline is definitely one of the most fun ones that I've had, and yes, it did have its fair share of gimmicks, which is usually something that I will rail against, and actually I'm going to go on a rant on it in a minute. It does have a lot of those gimmicky quests, but I think that in this circumstance it was the correct use of the said mechanics, because it made total sense in the context of you teaming up with Rambo. The zone's quests with Keeshan were just such a fantastic break in pace from what you had been doing in Elwyn Forest and Westfall, and yeah, overall, I just think that break in pace was very important. More importantly, though, there were some other things in the zone which kept it from being 100% gimmicky. There were plenty of other quests, say fighting the gnolls or repairing the bridge, that sort of thing, and they did provide enough variety. Now, actually, I think that Uldum could have worked out similarly well if they would have had less Indiana Jones quests, and focused a bit more on the really cool Tol'vir lore, while still having the short, fun and memorable Indiana Jones questline. My problem with that whole Indiana Jones thing was that it just stole the really cool, Egyptian tone of the entire zone. It just, the pop culture references were fine, funny, but I think it just got to the point where they were overplayed, they were often unfunny, and they were backed up with quests that were just a pain in the arse. So, yeah, and also, no more feckin' cinematics. That was another nice thing about Red Ridge. It didn't feel the cinematic heavy as the Indiana Jones stuff did in Red Ridge. In Uldum. Still, though, this whole kind of single quest line full of gimmicks is a very tough line to walk, and I just think it's very easy for them to fuck it up. Anyway, coming in at number 3, we have the Whining Fjord. And I actually love the story of this place. So first of all, we have the initial questline where you're securing a foothold against the Vrykul, and there was a bunch of memorable quests here, like the one where you basically brought the wounded Alliance scouts down off the spears, basically, that they were impaled in spears, so as a warning, and you brought them down off them essentially to end their suffering. And I don't know why, because usually quests never really kind of do anything for me in that regard, but I actually, I felt no feels, because you just, I don't know, didn't, but it still kind of had a nice tone-setting effect, I suppose, rather than, oh, so sad, but no, I think it just set a pretty nice tone to the zone moving forward. Then, moving on, I think there was a few very interesting quests where you got some nice lore dumps about the Vrykul, and then you also met the Lich King in a few regards, which was really, really cool. I think the quests like this did a great job in investing the player in the Lich King's story, which would eventually lead to people caring about the expansion's conclusion and the events in Icecrown Citadel. Then I really enjoyed the whole Iron Dwarf thing that you were doing with the Explorers League. You actually got a lot of pretty interesting lore, and I think it was just a really nice way of setting these guys up. It was also cool that the entire questline took place on this giant, like, stiff cliff face, and I just think that was very cool aesthetically. You also, once again, had this really nice view of the sea and a few icebergs and things like that, so I think that was all quite nice. Really, I just think the fjord was just such a great introduction to both the Vrykul and the Iron Dwarves. It was really nice at just setting the tone of Northrend. Then, of course, meeting the Tuskar was a treat. I love the atmosphere of these guys and the few quests that we got with them. There was also some like kind of cool little story moments in there as well. And then also at Fort Wildevar, I really enjoyed the quests there. I think you were killing a Yeti or something. Oh, damn, it's been too long. I'll actually be going through that area very soon in my Northrend vlog, once I just sort of get back to doing it. Anyway, coming in at number 2, we have Icecrown. And I love the Arthas story. I just really think that the questing here captured it very, very effectively. The introduction to the zone was nothing short of epic, with you aiding the Tyrian Forging and the Argent Crusade in securing a foothold in the zone. You had this great mix of 1 or 2 gimmicky quest types, but the thing is, these gimmicky quest types hadn't been really overplayed much at this stage, so they felt cool and unique. And also it was a great use of phasing tech, because it actually gave direct feedback to the actions that you did. You cleared out a zone, and then you built a base in it, and that actually made sense, and you got to see that reflected in the world. Then I think another cool thing about this zone is that Blizzard did a great job of making it 100% certain that we had very little power there. Like, I'd say maybe 40% of that zone is like the giant glacier bit, where it's just full of dead Alliance and Horde soldiers that have been risen from the dead, whatever, risen from the thing. And I think that just did a great job of being kind of like, whoa, we tried to go in here and we got destroyed. And this was just great because it made you feel like the zone was very dangerous, and also, more importantly, very much in the Lich King's iron grip. It did a great job of just making the Lich King feel like a dangerous enemy, and also the fact that so many, these large armies had been defeated, it reasonably, I think, did a reasonable job of upping the stakes a little bit and making you realize that, at least in terms of the story that they're going for, that the Lich King could probably start really destroying everything on the planet. So that was great. Instead of just kind of one MacGuffin, no, this guy could back up his individual power with a large army, and this was one of the few times in the game where a major villain really got that well realized in his own. Then we have the Ghost Kid quests. These got some really cool mechanics in them, like, say, the duel with Illidan, and then the time where you got to fight as the Lich King against some soldiers that he was, like, betraying or something. I think these were cool mechanically, and they also kind of gave some really interesting insights into Arthas himself and the Lich King, so I thought that was really nice. And then it was also very cool the way that there was the suggestion that this boy was actually an embodiment of Arthas' lost humanity. Then we have another quest, it's more a line, actually, and it's with Crusader Breitenbard. He's this guy who, in the initial attack in the zone, is mortally wounded and basically kind of cursed with this thing, and you go through this, like, whole bunch of quests going and trying to find various important figures, and then you eventually redeem his soul by going to Adal, and it was actually just really, really well done. It was a really nice quest. It was one of those times when Blizzard actually did a great job of trying to make a more emotional sort of story, so I think they really did a good job there. It would be nice if they could try to do more of these things in the future, rather than just ultra whimsical, hitting the 1, 2, and 3 button to kick carrots off a Mushan or something, like what we would sometimes get in Pandaria, which was rather unfortunate in my opinion. And then with patch 4.3, or, well, I don't know, 3 point something, was it 3.3 or 4, whatever, we got the Argent Crusade. Now, I really liked the tournament's feel, although narratively, I think it's a little bit odd having a competition to decide who gets to go and kill the Lich King. Didn't make much sense, did it? But anyway, the dailies themselves were actually really fun in my opinion, and of course they did suffer from the whole problem of you needing to do them multiple times, but the Black Knight questline was fun, and overall, I actually just think that was a decently solid patch. It's just really unfortunate that Blizzard expected us to raid that place as if it was a full-sized raid, which it wasn't. And that was definitely Blizzard's problem, and I'd say certainly a communication issue. If that place had been out for 3 months, then okay, fair enough. But it was out for too long, and it was just a bit of a mess up. But still, that doesn't really negate the fact that I really enjoyed the story of the zone, and as well, I suppose, the aesthetic of the tournament. So yeah, it does earn itself a mention, and it's actually my second favourite daily zone, with Keltonas actually beating it out, because of just how nice and compact and easy enough all the quests in Keltonas were, and it just made them kind of painless in terms of travel time. Sometimes carting yourself around Icecrown was a bit of a pain in the arse with these guys. Then, of course, there was also one or two of the final Lich King quests where, say, you and Tyrion and a few other people went in under disguise into that cathedral. I think that was really cool. And then also dealing with the Scarlet Crusade, I think that was also fun as well. So overall, I just think they did a great job quest-wise here. Anyway, before number 1, we are going to go into the honourable mentions. So the first honourable mention is the Netherwing questline. In Shadowmoon Valley. I thought this was really cool, and oddly enough, this was one of the only times where we actually got to meet Illidan in person, and it was really good. It's, of course, a pity that there was the kind of grindy elements here, but they did make sense in the context of this being basically a Shiny Mount zone, but I actually just think that they nailed the quests here. Then next we have the Badlands gimmick quests with Deathwing. I actually think these were kinda cool, but they do not give the zone an automatic pass. I think the zone did have plenty of problems, and it cannot get on any of these lists on the account of just a few quests. Then next, I actually really enjoyed Azure Mist Isle and the Eversong Woods. The quests here felt really solid, and there was a few decent story arcs going on. Overall, they weren't trying to kind of outpace themselves in terms of scale, and they just had one nice, solid, cohesive story, which I thought worked quite well. Then, an honourable mention goes to the Horde and Alliance War part of the quests in Kalimdor, whatever. I think that these were actually really cool, and it was one of the first times the Blizzard legitimately made it feel like there was a war going on between the two factions. They finally bothered to make decent-looking battlefields, and they backed them up with solid war-related quests. You were going in and killing the enemy soldiers and destroying their catapults and doing war-style things, and that was actually kind of nice for once. I think too often they completely missed the whole part of a war that involves scale, so it was nice to see at least a little bit of scale brought into it. Then I think that Hyjal was actually mostly quite good in terms of the story and the quality of the quests, but I think its heavy linearity really did hold it off this list. And then coming in at number 1, we have Dragonblight. I think that this is going to be here for many of the people who played during Wrath. The whole storyline with Bullvar was just simply fantastic. It was especially great because you really felt like you were a part of this story. Things like going around the ruined Alliance town and fighting the undead forces of Naxxramas, and leading the assault on the Frostworm, and then the final confrontation with the Lich. These were really cool. And one of the great things is that how these were not kind of a big long set of ultra linear quests where you just go from one quest to one quest crammed full of cutscenes. No, you would often get a few different quests, and they would all make sense in the context of the area. Nothing felt out of place, like, say, the kind of joke quests that they like to throw in these days, and I just think it all worked out really well. And then, of course, that all led up to the Wrathgate event and the attack in the Undercity. These were both really, really cool events. These quests and then the events that preceded them, I think they're just a great example of using fun mechanics sparingly, but to great effect when they are needed, instead of just trying to see how many gimmick quests they can cram in per, 10 meters or whatever. And then another great part of the zone is that you had two of the main stories going on at the same time. You had all the stuff with the Dragonflight and their their assault on the Blue Flight. Well, the other Dragonflights, that is. And then the attack and the Scourge. This gave a nice bit of narrative relief, and players could swap between the two lines as they pleased, giving them a little bit more agency, and it made them feel like they were the one doing the adventuring, not just being towed along the place by Chen Stormstout and his niece. By the way, Valley of the Four Winds, I know you're a little bit more open-ended, but you still towed me through half the zone following some random brewmaster and his niece. I really enjoyed Chen's story in Warcraft 3, but ugh, come on, you can do better, Blizzard. Anyway, there's one thing you're going to notice here. There really are no Cataclysm or Mists of Pandaria zones, and I'm just going to take 5 minutes here or whatever to explain why. My biggest problem with the questing in Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria is hyper linearity, to the point where you do not feel like you have any sort of agency at all. You are just following a complete, direct, linear path. I remember a really useful skill back in the day was being able to, say, get a bunch of quests go to town, get your quests, and then work out a plan, and then you would head out into the wilderness and you would do your quests. Now, that was okay, but it really fell on its feet or whatever, or I don't know, it fell apart, basically, in the vanilla questing zones, because they just weren't fun enough in terms of quests. But then when we moved into Northrend, and Wrath of the Lich King, they still had this more open-ended approach where you could go into a settlement, get all your quests, and then actually just read them or look at your quest log and see, okay, well, here are the things I can do, and how should I tackle this? How should I move ahead in my version of playing this role-playing game? That was cool. What they did, though, is they completely took that choice away. Another nice thing about the way this was done in Northrend is that they still kind of had those interesting quest mechanics, but they were used sparingly and only in the places where they made sense. Instead of where in Mists of Pandaria, they seemed to just throw in random quests that use gimmicks. I think a good example of one is the time, and I think this is probably one of the worst examples in terms of how bad it is, but when you're in the Valley of the Four Winds and you're just talking to this guy, and then you have to do this ultra annoying quest which involves getting this Mushan beast to hit assorted bits of fruit with its tail, using this really annoying kind of mechanic, and it's just not fun. There's too many quests like this where they're like, oh no, we must break up the gameplay, break up the flow, oh god, let's throw in a gimmick, but then it's just a hemmed-in, boring, shitty gimmick. So, yeah, I just think that combination of things being ultra-linear and then full of gimmicks really had, it was just problematic. And then another sort of side effect of the fact of this ultra-linearity was that when you go into a town, there's no real decision-making. Basically, often in, say, Wrath of the Lich King, I'll just use it as the example because I think it's a good one. When you go into one of these towns or zones, you go about the place, you collect your quests, you go back, you go out into the world, you do your quests, and you come back, and that happens a few times, right? And that was cool because you would constantly be in and around these big quest hubs, and it would actually feel like they were a real living, breathing place in the world. I think Valgard especially did a great job of evoking this, and that was nice because it's very important to ground your player in the world in which they're playing the game. That way, everything that takes place in that world has more meaning and has more effect. They kind of squandered this when they went with the hyperlinear approach, because you would just go from quest hub to quest hub to quest hub very, very quickly, and they felt completely disposable. Instead of there just being kind of like 3 big hubs in a zone where you actually stayed there for a decent amount of time, you just kind of went from place to place to place, you never felt grounded in the world, and that really contributed to the zones feeling like a slog. Now, did I say slog? Time to talk about the slog. So the reason they made everything ultra-linear is because they wanted to emphasize story a little bit more, instead of just giving us players the benefit of the doubt and sort of realizing that we would be able to infer a story ourselves, and that would actually be a far more powerful story than what they could possibly tell by using these crappy cinematics, this bad voice acting, and the bad writing that they seem to have had. There were just too many times in Mists of Pandaria and Cataclysm where you felt like Robin. You weren't Batman, you were bloody Robin. You were following Chen, or you were following Thrall, or something like that, and it was just bad. Now, even if people did enjoy these stories, and I can totally understand how they could, the problem is if you go through that in your second character, the story that this hyperlinear quest structure was there to reinforce is now gone because you've already experienced it. Yet the hyperlinear quest structure still remains, which means that it's just not fun. The story that kept the quest interesting is gone, and all that remains is the slog. That's my biggest problem. It just feels like a goddamn slog. So yeah, there's the rant. Not particularly well structured, but you know what? Someday I will just do a full-on video on that. But now it is time for the overall top 5. So, coming in at number 5, we have Nagrand. This zone's aesthetic was just so good and it evoked so many kind of cool feelings in me that it just needs to be there at number 5. Even though the quests were not always the most solid, because it was still the Burning Crusade style of questing, I still thoroughly loved my time in this zone. I just think it was absolutely fantastic. So Nagrand, you get a massive thumbs up. Then coming in at number 4, we have Icecrown itself. I think that its set-piece quests were all really, really good. They were well-paced, and they were not kind of overdone. Another nice thing is just the whole aesthetic in the zone and all those things I've talked about. The only reason that it's not higher is first of all because it faces some fantastic competition, and then also because sometimes the travel time from place to place was a little bit annoying. And then at number 3 we have the Grizzly Hills. Now this place did not have the most amazing quests, it certainly doesn't compare to Dragonblight or Icecrown or the Howling Fjord, but I think they were solid and really just the whole way that the aesthetic of this zone correlated perfectly with what I personally find to be kind of beautiful. Because of that, Grizzly Hills comes in at number 3. And then, at number 2, we have Dragonblight. Okay, I'm going to say this zone was not the most amazing aesthetically, which is why it isn't on the aesthetic list, but I just think for storytelling in World of Warcraft, this was one of the pinnacles, especially that quest line, and I think it's really sad that they, in my opinion, have not really reached that level since. But because of that, it absolutely deserves its place here. And then, at number 1, we have the Howling Fjord. People who don't like Northrend are gonna hate this video, and it's kinda great. So the Howling Fjord, why do I like it? I just think it's this perfect blend of story and aesthetic, and then the fact that I love these kind of like picturesque northern, like Scandinavian style sort of vistas and landscapes. So the Howling Fjord is just going to appeal to what I like as a person, and everyone likes different stuff. Maybe you like deserty things, so maybe, I don't know, Uldum is your favorite place. That's totally cool. I enjoyed it, Uldum aesthetically, as an example. So yeah, Howling Fjord, you get number 1. I just think it's that perfect blend of aesthetic and story, and it's a win. Another great thing I just want to say about the Howling Fjord is I just feel that in terms of tone and the things it set up, it was a perfect introduction to Northrend. I just think it was very, very well done. And it's kind of sad that we're not going to get a zone like that again because of the way they've changed questing and also because there's no real reason to go back to Northrend, but I'm happy enough with that. Anyway, so that is it for the video. Be sure to leave your top 5 in the description. I will correlate them all together, and then we can do a follow-up video where we have a chat about what other people thought, and if I maybe get, I don't know, 40-50 responses, then I'll be able to actually just do an actual top 5 list based on what most people put in each place and stuff like that. But anyway, that's it for this video. You have listened to me for 36 minutes and 28 seconds, so wow, thank you very much, it's really appreciated. Oh, and just one last little thing, if you could drop a like if you enjoyed the video, it would really help me out, because these big long videos take a hell of a lot of work to do, so it's good, so yay. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.